She was never meant to come back. When King Aldrich of Valdorn chose Sorsha to seal the peace treaty with his greatest enemy, he told the court it was an honor, a noble sacrifice for the good of the realm. The other women had refused. They had wept, begged, thrown themselves at the king's feet rather than be sent to the Wolf of Kethrin. But Sorsha had no one to beg for her, no family to protest, no status worth protecting. So she went. She stood before the rival Alpha in his great hall, cloaked and silent, expecting to sign papers, bow her head, and return home within the week. A formality, a symbol. Then Alpha Theron looked at her. His gaze swept over her once, and something shifted in his expression. Something cold and certain and terrifying. "She stays," he said. The envoy from Valdorn sputtered. "Your Highness, she's merely a tribute, a gesture of good faith. She's meant to return after the signing." Theron didn't look away from her. Those pale eyes, the color of winter moons, held hers through the shadow of her hood. "The treaty is signed," he said. "She's mine now." Sorsha's blood turned to ice. "She doesn't return," the Alpha continued, his voice final as a closing gate. "Ever." She didn't understand why he wanted her. She didn't understand what he saw when he looked at her, what made him so certain she belonged to him now. Not until she discovered what her own king had truly sent her to do, and what the rival Alpha was willing to burn the world to protect. The women had been gathered in the throne room like lambs awaiting slaughter. Sorsha stood among them, though not truly with them. The noble daughters clutched each other's hands, their fine gowns trembling with every shaky breath. Lady Fenella, the Duke's youngest, had fainted twice already. Her sisters fanned her pale face while casting furious glances toward the dais where King Aldrich sat, watching them all with cold amusement. He needed a woman to send to Kethrin. The war had lasted 11 years. 11 years of blood and fire and widows wailing in the streets. Now, finally, Alpha Theron had agreed to a treaty. Peace, in exchange for territory, gold, and one woman from the Valdornian court. A tribute, the treaty called it. Everyone knew what that truly meant. The Wolf of Kethrin had a reputation. They said he was more beast than man. They said he'd killed his own father to take the throne. They said the women who entered his castle were never seen again. So when the king had summoned the eligible women of the court, asking for a volunteer, no one had stepped forward. "Lady Fenella," the king called, and the girl crumpled to the floor again, unconscious before her name finished echoing through the chamber. Her father rushed forward, prostrating himself. "Your Majesty, please. She's too delicate. The journey alone would kill her." Aldrich's lip curled. "Lady Margot." "I'm with child, Your Majesty," the woman cried, though everyone knew she had not so much as kissed her husband in months. One by one, the women found excuses, illnesses, pregnancies, elderly parents who needed care. The lies grew more desperate with each refusal. And through it all, Sorsha stood silent in the back of the room, her plain gray cloak marking her as no one of consequence. A ward of the crown. An orphan taken in out of charity, they said, given a roof and scraps and nothing more. No one looked at her. No one ever looked at her. That was how she'd survived this long. Enough. The king's voice sliced through the chaos. He stood, his robes pooling around him like spilled blood. "If none of you will honor your kingdom, then I will choose." The women held their breath. Aldrich's gaze swept the room, passing over silk gowns and jeweled throats, over trembling daughters of powerful houses. He could not afford to offend the great families. He could not risk their rebellion. He needed someone expendable. His eyes found Sorsha. "You," he said, the shadow in the corner. "Step forward." Every head turned. Sorsha felt their stares like burning coals against her skin. She forced her feet to move. She forced herself to walk toward the dais on legs that felt carved from stone. "Your Majesty." She kept her head bowed, her voice barely above a whisper. "Look at me." She raised her eyes, careful to keep them dull, empty. Never let them see. Never let them know. Aldrich studied her face with the interest of a man examining an insect. You're the one they found in the northern village, the sole survivor of that incident. That incident. Her mother's screams, the flames, the soldiers dragging her away while she fought and bit and called out visions she couldn't control. Yes, Your Majesty. No family, no prospects, no value whatsoever. He said it plainly, without cruelty, as if simply stating the weather. You'll do. The relief in the room was palpable. The noble daughters slumped against each other. Lady Fenella's father wiped his brow. Sorsha said nothing. What was there to say? She had known this moment would come eventually. The king had kept her alive for a reason. She was useful precisely because she was disposable. Prepare her, Aldrich commanded. She leaves at dawn. The journey to Kethrin took 5 days. 5 days of rough roads and colder nights. 5 days of riding in a covered carriage with guards who looked at her like she was already dead. Sorsha spent most of it staring at her hands, hidden beneath thick gloves. She could still feel the mark there, branded into her palm years ago. The seer's mark, the sign of a condemned woman. In Valdorn, seers were executed. They could glimpse the future, sense deception, see through the lies that held kingdoms together. They were too dangerous to live. Her mother had been a seer. When Sorsha's gift had manifested at 12 years old, screaming out a vision in the middle of the marketplace, her mother had grabbed her and run. They'd hidden for 3 years before the soldiers found them. Her mother had burned. Sorsha had been branded and kept, a useful secret for a king who liked knowing which of his nobles might betray him. He'd used her gift sparingly over the years, always in private, always with the threat of death hanging over her. And now he'd sent her away. She should feel relieved. Instead, she felt the cold certainty of something terrible waiting ahead. The carriage stopped. We've arrived, the guard announced. Sorsha's breath caught as she stepped out and saw the castle of Kethrin rising before her. It was nothing like Valdorn's golden spires and delicate architecture. This fortress was carved from black stone, jagged and imposing against a gray sky. It looked like something that had clawed its way up from the earth, all sharp angles and brutal strength. Beautiful, she thought, surprising herself. Terrifying, she corrected. The guards escorted her through the gates, through corridors of dark stone lit by flickering torches. Servants stopped to stare as she passed. She kept her hood up, her face shadowed, her hands clasped tightly together. They entered the great hall. It was massive. Vaulted ceilings disappeared into shadow above. A fire roared in a hearth large enough to stand in. And at the far end, on a throne of blackened wood, sat the Alpha, Theron of Kethrin. She had heard the rumors, the monster, the beast, the killer who'd drowned his kingdom in blood. No one had mentioned he was beautiful. He sat utterly still, watching her approach with eyes the color of winter moonlight, pale silver, almost white, ringed with dark lashes. His hair was black as midnight, falling past his shoulders in loose waves. His jaw could have been carved by a sculptor trying to capture the essence of danger itself. But it was the cold that struck her most. Even from across the room, she could feel it radiating from him. Not cruelty, not malice, but a bone-deep cold that seemed to seep into the air around him, as if winter lived inside his skin. The envoy stepped forward, bowing low. Your Highness, King Aldrich of Valdorn sends his tribute with deepest respect and hopes for lasting peace between our kingdoms. Theron said nothing. His gaze remained fixed on Sorsha. She felt it like a physical touch, that stare. It moved over her hooded form, lingering on her covered hands, her shadowed face. His brow creased with sudden interest. The envoy continued his rehearsed speech, droning on about treaties and territory and mutual prosperity. Sorsha barely heard him. She was too busy trying not to tremble under the weight of those silver eyes. And then, Cutting through the envoy's words like a blade through silk, the Alpha spoke. She stays. The hall went silent. The envoy blinked. Your Highness? The woman. Theron rose from his throne, and he was even taller than she'd expected. Massive. Powerful. The kind of alpha who could shift into a wolf large enough to bring down a horse. She stays here. Your Highness, I think there's been a misunderstanding. The envoy's voice wavered. She's merely a tribute, a symbolic gesture of good faith. She's meant to return to Valdorn after the treaty is signed. Theron descended the steps slowly, each footfall echoing in the silence. The cold intensified as he approached, sharp enough to make Sorcia's breath fog in the air. He stopped directly in front of her. She could smell him now. Pine and frost and something darker beneath. Look at me, he said. Sorcia raised her eyes. Through the shadow of her hood she met his gaze. Something crackled between them, electric and strange, and she saw his pupils dilate slightly. The treaty is signed, Theron said, still looking at her. She's mine now. But Your Highness? She doesn't return. His voice dropped, soft and final as falling snow. Ever. The envoy sputtered protests. The guards shifted uneasily. And Sorcia stood frozen, her pulse racing so hard she could hear it in her ears. Why? Why would he want her? She was nobody. Less than nobody. A discarded ward with no beauty, no status, no value. Unless he knew. The thought turned her blood to ice. Unless he knew what she was. Theron's hand rose slowly, reaching toward her hood. Sorcia stopped breathing. His fingers brushed the fabric, cold as death itself, and then paused. His head tilted slightly, studying her reaction. The fear she couldn't hide. Interesting, he murmured. Then he turned away, leaving her standing there with her secret still hidden and her fate completely unknown. Take her to the East Chambers, he commanded. She's to be treated as a guest, not a prisoner. And Sorcia was led away, still trembling, still confused, still desperately wondering what the Wolf of Kethrin had seen when he looked at her. The chambers were not a dungeon. That was Sorcia's first coherent thought as the servants guided her through a heavy oak door into a suite larger than any space she'd ever occupied. Canopied bed draped in deep blue velvet, a fireplace already crackling with warmth, windows overlooking mountain peaks dusted with snow. This was a room for nobility, for honored guests. Not for a disposable tribute meant to seal a treaty. Your bath is being prepared, my lady, the servant said, a young woman with kind eyes and copper hair braided down her back. My name is Bria. I've been assigned to attend you during your stay. During your stay, as if this were a visit, as if she could leave whenever she wished. Thank you, Sorcia managed, her voice hoarse from days of disuse. Bria curtsied and withdrew to supervise the other servants filling a copper tub in the adjacent bathing chamber. Sorcia stood alone in the center of the room, still wearing her traveling cloak, still hiding. She moved to the window. Kethrin spread out below her, a city of dark stone and winding streets, nothing like Valdorn's crowded sprawl. The mountains rose behind it, their peaks lost in clouds. Everything here seemed sharper, colder, and more honest somehow. A knock at the door made her spin around. She expected a servant, perhaps the king's steward with instructions or restrictions. Instead, the door opened and Theron himself walked through. Sorcia's breath caught. He'd changed from his throne room attire into simpler clothing, a dark tunic that emphasized the breadth of his shoulders, leather bracers on his forearms. Without the crown and the formal setting, he looked somehow more dangerous, not less. The cold preceded him. She felt it before he'd taken 3 steps into the room, that unnatural frost that seemed to radiate from his very bones. Leave us, he said to the servants. They scattered like leaves before wind. Even Bria, who had seemed so calm, hurried out with her head bowed. The door closed. Sorcia and the Alpha were alone. Sit, he said. She didn't move. Couldn't. Theron studied her for a long moment, then crossed to a chair by the fire and lowered himself into it with the careful movements of a man concealing pain. Sorsha noticed how he positioned himself close to the flames, how his fingers flexed as if trying to draw warmth into them. "I'm not going to hurt you," he said. "Then why am I here?" The question came out sharper than she intended. She braced herself for anger, for punishment, for the violence the rumors promised. Instead, something flickered across his face. Amusement, perhaps, or respect. "Direct," he observed. "Good. I have no patience for court games." "Neither do I, Your Highness. I have no skill in them." "No?" His head tilted, those pale eyes moving over her. "I imagine not. You're not like the others Aldrich has sent over the years. The pretty distractions. The noble daughters meant to spy or seduce. Others." She hadn't known there had been others. "What happened to them?" she asked before she could stop herself. "Sent home. Untouched." A pause. "Unlike you, they had nothing I needed." Sorsha's stomach dropped. "And what do you need from me?" Theron didn't answer immediately. He watched the fire, and in its light, she saw the shadows beneath his eyes, the tightness around his mouth that spoke of exhaustion carefully hidden. "You'll live here now," he said finally. "In these chambers, you'll have everything you require: clothing, food, servants, books, whatever you wish." "I'm a prisoner." "You're protected." "From what?" His gaze returned to her, sharp and knowing. "From whoever burned that mark into your palm." Sorsha's hand flew to her chest, clutching the fabric of her glove. Her pulse thundered against her ribs. He knew. How did he know? "I don't—" she started. "Don't." His voice cut through her protest. "I can smell lies, Sorsha. Don't waste both our time." The sound of her name in his voice did something strange to her. No one called her by name. She was girl to the servants, ward to the court. Nothing at all to the king who had owned her. "How do you know my name?" she whispered. "I know many things." Theron rose from the chair, and again she noticed that careful movement, the pain he thought he was hiding. "You will not contact Valdorn. You will not attempt to leave. You will not speak of what you are to anyone in this court. And in return? In return, you live." He moved toward the door, and Sorsha should have stayed silent, should have accepted her fate and begun planning an escape. Instead, she heard herself speak. "Why me?" Theron paused with his hand on the door. "Your king wouldn't have sent you unless you were worthless to him," he said, not turning around. "Or dangerous. Which do you think I am?" Now he turned. Those winter eyes found hers, and for a moment the cold in the room intensified until she could see her own breath. "I think," he said slowly, "that you're the most dangerous thing Aldrich has ever let slip through his fingers. And I think he has no idea what he's lost." Then he was gone, and Sorsha stood alone in her beautiful prison, trembling with questions she didn't know how to ask. The next 2 days passed in a strange suspension of time. Sorsha bathed, ate, slept in the impossibly soft bed while her mind raced through possibilities. Theron knew about her mark. But did he know what it meant? He'd said he could smell lies, but could he sense visions? Could he know that behind her eyes lived a power that had killed her mother and ruined her life? Bria attended her quietly, never prying, though Sorsha caught her glancing at the gloves she refused to remove. "My lady," Bria said on the second evening, laying out a gown of deep emerald. "The Alpha requests your presence at dinner tonight." Sorsha's hand stilled over the book she'd been pretending to read. "A request or a command?" Bria hesitated. "His Highness does not make requests, my lady." "So, a command." She dressed in the emerald gown because she had no choice, though she kept her gloves on, thin silk ones that matched the fabric. Her hood remained down since there was no point hiding her face now. He'd already seen it. already looked through it to whatever lay beneath. The dining hall was smaller than she expected, intimate rather than grand. A single table set for two, candles flickering in iron sconces, a fire roaring in the hearth. Theron stood by the window, staring out at the night sky. He didn't turn when she entered, but she saw his shoulders shift slightly. "Sit," he said. She sat. He joined her a moment later, taking the chair across from her. Servants appeared with wine and food, then vanished as silently as they'd come. For several long moments, neither of them spoke. Sorsha studied him in the candlelight. The dark circles under his eyes seemed deeper tonight. His skin had a pallor that didn't match his obvious strength. And the cold, that persistent, bone-deep cold, seemed stronger somehow. He's sick, she realized. Dying, maybe. "You're staring," Theron said. She didn't look away. "You're in pain." A flicker of surprise crossed his features, there and gone too quickly to name. Observant. "What's wrong with you?" "Nothing that concerns you." "If I'm to be your prisoner, I'd like to know if my jailer is likely to die before releasing me." The words were bold, too bold, and she saw the flash of surprise in his eyes. Then, unexpectedly, he laughed. It transformed his face. The coldness cracked, just for a moment, and she glimpsed something warm underneath. Something almost human. "You have a sharp tongue," he said. "Did Aldrich know about that when he sent you?" "Aldrich doesn't know anything about me except that I was convenient to dispose of." "Dispose of?" Theron's amusement faded. "Is that what you think this is?" "What else would it be? I'm a ward with no family, no status, and no value. He sent me expecting me to be killed or worse." She reached for her wine glass, surprised to find her hand steady. "He just didn't expect you to keep me." "No." Theron's voice was soft. "I imagine he didn't." They ate in silence for a while, and Sorsha was surprised to find herself hungry. The food was simple but excellent, nothing like the scraps she'd survived on at court. "Ask your questions," Theron said eventually. She looked up. "What?" "You have questions. I can see them burning behind your eyes. Ask." Sorsha set down her fork. "Why did you refuse to let me return?" "Because you're safer here." "From what?" "From the man who branded you." His gaze dropped to her gloved hands. "From the king who kept you alive, only to use your gift when it suited him. From whoever else in that court knows what you are and has been waiting for an opportunity." Her blood ran cold. "How do you know all of this?" "I have sources. I've been watching Valdorn for years, gathering intelligence. Your name came across my reports several times. The king's secret weapon. The girl who could see lies." Sorsha's vision swam. He'd been watching, waiting. And when Aldrich had finally made his move, Theron had been ready. "You planned this," she breathed. "You waited for him to send me?" "I waited for him to make a mistake." Theron's eyes glittered. "He made several. Sending you was only the most recent. Why do you want to see her?" The question hung between them. Theron's jaw tightened. For a moment she thought he wouldn't answer. Then he said quietly, "I have need of your gift. To spy? To interrogate prisoners? To see which of your nobles are plotting against you? To survive." The word fell like a stone into still water. Sorsha stared at him, at the shadows under his eyes and the pallor of his skin and the cold that clung to him like a shroud. "You're dying," she said. "Yes." No denial, no deflection, just simple truth. "A curse," he continued, "laid by a Valdornian witch during the war. It's killing me slowly, freezing me from the inside out. In 6 months, maybe less, my heart will stop." Sorsha's own pulse quickened. "And you think I can help?" "I think you're the only one who can." Theron leaned forward, and the intensity in his gaze pinned her in place. Seers don't just see lies, they see truth. Possibilities. Paths not yet taken. "That's not—" she started. "You can see how to break the curse." His voice dropped. Can't you? Sorsha's hands trembled in her lap. She thought of all the years she'd spent suppressing her visions, pushing them down, refusing to let them surface. She'd learned control out of survival, but that didn't mean the power had disappeared. I don't know, she whispered. I've never tried to see something specific. The visions come when they want to. I can't control them. Then you'll learn. Theron sat back, his expression unreadable. You'll learn? Even because my survival depends on it, and yours depends on mine. The threat was clear beneath the calm words, but so was something else. Desperation, carefully hidden. Fear, buried deep. He wasn't just a monster keeping her captive. He was a dying man, grasping at the only hope he had left. I'll try, Sorsha said finally, but I make no promises. I'm not asking for promises. Theron rose from the table, and she saw the stiffness in his movements, the way he braced himself against the cold eating him from within. I'm asking for effort. Give me that, and I'll give you everything I have. Including my freedom? He paused at the door, looking back at her over his shoulder. Break my curse, he said, and I'll give you the world. Then he was gone, and Sorsha sat alone with the weight of impossible expectations settling onto her shoulders. A week passed before Sorsha saw Theron again. She spent the days exploring the castle within her permitted boundaries, the east wing, the library, the small garden courtyard where winter roses somehow bloomed despite the frost. Bria accompanied her everywhere, a gentle shadow who answered questions when asked, but never volunteered information. Sorsha learned what she could from observation. The court of Kethrin was smaller than Valdorn's but fiercer. The nobles who passed her in corridors looked at her with open curiosity, some with suspicion, and none with the sneering dismissal she'd grown accustomed to back home. Here, she was a mystery, the king's new acquisition, the woman from the enemy kingdom who'd arrived as tribute, and somehow become a guest. The whispers followed her everywhere. Why does he keep her? Perhaps she's his new mistress. She never removes those gloves. Something's wrong with her hands. Sorsha ignored them all, just as she'd ignored the whispers her entire life. She had larger concerns. Every night she tried to summon a vision. She sat in the darkness, focused on Theron's curse, tried to see the path to breaking it. And every night, nothing came. The gift that had tormented her since childhood, that had killed her mother and ruined her life, now refused to appear when she actually needed it. On the 7th evening, Bria brought a summons. His Highness requests your presence in the West Tower, my lady. Sorsha followed a guard through corridors she hadn't yet explored, up winding staircases and through heavy doors, until she emerged into a circular chamber at the top of the highest tower. And it was a war room. Maps covered every surface, tactical markers scattered across tables, weapons displayed on walls. But it was empty now, except for two figures standing near the window. Theron and a man she didn't recognize. Older, with silver threading through dark hair and a scar running down his left cheek. His bearing marked him as a warrior, and the way he stood at Theron's shoulder marked him as trusted. Leave us, Cormac, Theron said without looking away from the window. The older man's gaze flickered to Sorsha, assessing and protective in equal measure. But he bowed and withdrew, closing the heavy door behind him. Silence. Sorsha approached slowly, stopping several feet from the Alpha. Even at this distance, the cold radiating from him made her skin prickle. You've been trying, Theron said. A statement, not a question. Every night. Nothing comes. Why? I don't know. Frustration crept into her voice. The visions have never been controllable. They come in moments of heightened emotion, strong feeling, fear, anger, grief. I can't simply will them into existence. Theron turned from the window. In the moonlight streaming through the glass, he looked like a ghost. Pale skin, dark hollows under his eyes, frost glittering at his temples like premature silver. He was worse than a week ago. Then we need to trigger them, he said. How? Instead of answering, he crossed the room to a small table where a sealed letter waited. He picked it up and held it out to her. This arrived today, he said. From Valdorn. From your king. Sorsha's hand trembled as she took the letter. She recognized the royal seal pressed into deep red wax. Breaking it felt like cracking open her own ribcage. The letter was brief. To Alpha Theron of Kethran, you have refused to return our tribute as agreed. This is a violation of our treaty. We demand the woman called Sorsha be sent back to Valdorn immediately. If she is not returned within 30 days, we will consider this an act of war. Furthermore, we feel obligated to inform you of her true nature. The woman you harbor is a condemned seer, branded and convicted for crimes against the crown. Her gift is dangerous and unstable. She cannot be controlled. We sent her to you as a courtesy, assuming you would dispose of her appropriately. Your decision to keep her is ill-advised. Return her or destroy her. Either way, she cannot remain. King Aldric of Valdorn. Sorsha read the words twice, 3 times, waiting for them to make sense. Uncourtesy. Dispose of her. Destroy her. Aldric hadn't sent her as a tribute. He'd sent her as a problem he wanted solved. He'd expected Theron to kill her the moment he discovered what she was, and when that didn't happen, when Theron kept her instead. Now Aldric was threatening war unless Theron either sent her back to be executed or killed her himself. The letter fell from her numb fingers. He sent me to die, she whispered. Yes. He expected you to kill me. Yes. Why didn't you? Theron's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his gaze. Because dead seers are useless to me. The words should have been cold, transactional, and cruel. Instead, they struck Sorsha as almost gentle. At least he was honest about his motivations. At least he wasn't pretending she had any value beyond her gift. What will you do? She asked. If you don't return me, he'll declare war. Let him. You can't, she started. I can. Theron cut her off. And I will. Aldric has been looking for an excuse to attack Kethran for years. This letter isn't about you. It's about finishing what the last war started. Then why send me at all? If he was planning to attack regardless? Because you're the perfect justification. Theron moved closer, and the cold intensified until her breath fogged between them. Keep you, and he has his excuse. Return you, and he eliminates a threat while making me look weak for surrendering to his demands. So I'm leverage, Sorsha said bitterly. Either way. You're a catalyst. Theron's hand rose slowly, hovering near her face without touching. A spark that could start a war, or end a curse, depending on what I choose. And what do you choose? His fingers brushed her cheek. The vision hit her like a lightning strike. She saw him lying on frozen ground, frost consuming his body, his eyes open but unseeing. She saw soldiers in Valdornian armor pouring through broken gates. She saw fire and blood and screaming and, beneath it all, a heartbeat slowing, stopping. She saw him die. Sorsha gasped and stumbled backward, breaking contact. Her knees buckled and strong arms caught her before she hit the floor. Theron. He held her against his chest, his body impossibly cold, and his arms impossibly solid. She could hear his heartbeat, slow and steady, and beneath it, a strange crackling sound like ice forming on a winter lake. What did you see? He demanded. She couldn't speak, couldn't breathe, and the vision still burned behind her eyes, death and destruction and endings. Sorsha. His voice was sharp with urgency. What did you see? You die, she managed. The war comes, Valdorn attacks, and you die. His arms tightened around her. She expected him to drop her, to pull away, to rage at the prophecy she'd just delivered. Instead, he let out a slow breath that frosted in the air between them. Then we have work to do, he said quietly. Don't we? Sorsha looked up at him, at this strange, cold, dying man who refused to let her go, and realized something terrible. She didn't want to let him die. She barely knew him. He was her captor, her jailer, a monster by every rumor she'd ever heard. But in this moment, with his arms around her and her vision still burning fresh, she felt something shift between them. A thread, fragile and barely there, connecting them. She didn't understand it. She didn't want it. But she couldn't deny it existed. "My lord," she said, her voice steadier now. "If Valdorn attacks, if war comes, your people will die too." My vision showed soldiers pouring through the gates. "This curse isn't just killing you, it's leaving your kingdom vulnerable." "I know." "Then we need to move faster. I need to see more." "What do you need?" She hesitated. The visions came through strong emotion, through connection. The touch had triggered this one. Perhaps more contact, more intimacy, more understanding of him and his curse. "I need to understand," she said. "The curse. How it started. What it does to you. I need to know everything." Theron studied her face for a long moment. Then, slowly, he released her and stepped back. "Tomorrow night," he said, "I'll tell you everything." He called for the guards to escort her back to her chambers, but at the door, he stopped her with a word. "Sorsha." She turned. "What else did you see?" he asked. "In the vision, there was something more. I saw it in your face." She thought about lying. The truth was too strange, too intimate, and too impossible. But he could smell lies. "I felt you die," she admitted. "Not just saw it, felt it. Your heartbeat stopping, the cold taking you. It was..." She struggled for words. "It was like losing something I didn't know I had." Theron's expression flickered. For just a moment, he looked lost. Like a man who'd been wandering in darkness for so long he'd forgotten what light looked like. Then the mask returned. "Tomorrow night," he repeated. "We begin." Sorsha returned to her chambers with the letter still clutched in her hand and war looming on the horizon. She had 30 days to break a curse she didn't understand, save a man she barely knew, and somehow survive the web of politics and power that had been closing around her since birth. And beneath it all, a single thought drummed through her mind. She'd felt him die, felt the loss of him like a wound in her own chest. Why? Why did losing a stranger hurt so much? She didn't have an answer. She was terrified that she would find one. The following night, Theron came to her chambers. Sorsha heard the knock and knew it was him before Bria opened the door. The temperature in the room dropped several degrees, that familiar cold announcing his presence like a herald. "Leave us," Theron said to the servant. Bria curtsied and withdrew, closing the door softly behind her. Sorsha sat by the fire, wrapped in a thick shawl against the chill that followed him everywhere. She'd spent the day preparing questions, organizing her thoughts, trying to approach this like the strategic problem it was. But seeing him now, seeing the way his jaw tightened against pain he refused to acknowledge, all her careful preparations scattered. "You look worse," she said. "Your gift for flattery astounds me." Despite everything, she almost smiled. "I thought you hated court games." "I do." He lowered himself into the chair across from her, close to the fire but not close enough to truly warm himself. She wondered if anything could warm him anymore. "Which is why I appreciate your honesty, even when it's inconvenient." "Then honestly, you need to tell me about this curse, tonight, before you deteriorate further." Theron studied her face in the firelight. The flames cast dancing shadows across his features, softening the sharp edges, making him look almost approachable. Almost. "What do you know about the war?" he asked. "The official story. 11 years of conflict? Territorial disputes? Your father killed in battle?" "My father wasn't killed in battle." Theron's voice was flat. "He was assassinated. By a Valdornian witch who'd infiltrated our court." Sorsha's breath caught. I didn't know. Few do. Aldrich made sure the truth was buried. The witch, a woman named Vesper, posed as a healer for 3 years. She tended to my father, gained his trust, and learned his weaknesses. Then, on the eve of what was supposed to be a decisive battle, she killed him. How? A curse laid through blood magic. She cut him while pretending to treat a minor wound, whispered words no one understood, and within hours, ice began forming in his veins. Theron's hands clenched on the arms of his chair. He froze from the inside out. It took him 3 days to die. The horror of it washed over Sorsha. 3 days, feeling your blood turn to ice, your heart slowing, your lungs filling with frost. "And you?" she whispered. I caught her. His gaze held hers, and she saw something ancient in them, something cold and terrible. Before she could escape, I demanded she reverse the curse. She laughed and said the magic was already spreading, that because I'd touched my father's body while trying to save him, the curse had passed to me. Passed to you? It's a bloodline curse, father to son. It would have taken my heirs too, if I'd ever had any. A bitter smile flickered across his face. I killed her before she finished explaining how to break it. In my rage, I destroyed any chance of learning the cure. Sorsha leaned forward. There must be something. Some record. Some other witch who knows. I've spent 9 years searching. Theron's voice cracked just slightly before he controlled it. Every witch, every healer, every scholar who might have answers. Nothing. The curse continues spreading. Slower than it took my father, perhaps because I was only infected secondarily, but spreading nonetheless. How long do you have? 6 months. Maybe less. The cold is reaching my heart. He pressed a hand to his chest, and Sorsha saw frost crystallizing on his fingertips. When it arrives there fully, and I die, she should feel nothing. This was her captor, her jailer, the man holding her prisoner in a foreign land. His death would mean her freedom. Instead, she felt something crack inside her chest. Your visions, Theron continued, watching her carefully. They show truth, possibilities. If there's a way to break this curse, you might be able to see it. I told you, I can't control. The vision came when I touched you. He leaned forward, and the cold built between them. Connection triggers your gift. Strong emotion. Perhaps if we... He trailed off, and Sorsha understood what he wasn't saying. More contact, more connection, more intimacy. You want me to bond with you? She said slowly, emotionally. So my visions will recognize your fate as important. I want you to try. His voice dropped. I'm not asking you to love me, and I'm asking you to know me well enough that your gift responds to my need. Know him. This cold, dying, dangerous man who'd claimed her from an enemy king and refused to let her go. And if the visions show that there is no cure? She asked. If the truth is that you're going to die regardless? Theron was quiet for a long moment. Then at least I'll know, he said finally. And I can stop searching and start preparing my kingdom for what comes after. The resignation in his voice hurt more than it should have. All right, Sorsha said. I'll try. But I need something from you first. Name it. Tomorrow, introduce me to your court. Properly. Not as a tribute or a prisoner, but as whatever I actually am to you now. Theron's eyebrows rose. Why? Because your people whisper about me constantly. They don't know what I am, or why I'm here, and that uncertainty is breeding fear and resentment. If I'm going to help you, I need to move freely. I need access to your records, your scholars, and your history. I can't do that while hiding in these chambers like a shameful secret. She expected resistance, arguments about security, about appearances, about the political complications of acknowledging her publicly. Instead, Theron smiled. It transformed his face completely. The coldness cracked, and beneath it, she glimpsed warmth, humor, something almost boyish. "You continue to surprise me," he said. "Is that a yes?" "That's a yes." He rose from his chair, and she noticed he moved more easily now, as if their conversation had somehow lightened his burden. "Tomorrow evening, there's a formal dinner to celebrate the winter solstice. You'll attend as my guest of honor." "Guest of honor? Would you prefer I introduce you as my prisoner?" "I'd prefer you introduce me as your ally." The word felt strange on her tongue, but also right. "Whatever happens, we're working toward the same goal now. Your survival." Theron studied her for a long moment. Then he crossed to her chair and held out his hand. Sorsha hesitated only briefly before taking it. The cold shocked through her palm, but no vision came this time. Just the sensation of his fingers closing around hers, strong and steady despite the frost that lived in his veins. "Allies, then," he said quietly. "I haven't had one of those in a very long time." He released her hand and walked to the door. But before he left, he paused and looked back. "The green gown," he said. "The one you wore to dinner last week. We'll wear that tomorrow. It suits you." Then he was gone, and Sorsha sat alone with her hand still tingling from his touch, and her heart beating faster than it had any right to. The great hall of Kethrin blazed with light. Thousands of candles glittered from iron chandeliers, their flames reflecting off polished stone and gleaming silver. The court had gathered in full splendor, nobles in their finest clothes, warriors in ceremonial armor, servants moving through the crowd with trays of wine and delicacies. And at the center of it all, Sorsha stood beside the Alpha King. The green gown clung to her figure in ways that made her self-conscious. Bria had styled her hair in an elaborate arrangement that left her neck exposed, and for the first time since arriving in Kethrin, she'd removed her gloves. The brand on her palm was hidden by careful positioning, her hands clasped demurely in front of her. But she felt naked without the familiar protection of fabric between her skin and the world. "Breathe," Theron murmured beside her. "You look like you're facing an execution." "Aren't I?" His lips twitched. "The Kethrani court is not as vicious as Valdorn's. We prefer honest combat to political maneuvering." "That's supposed to comfort me?" "It means if someone wants to hurt you, they'll do it openly. You'll see the blow coming." Somehow, that did comfort her. At least enemies here would be honest about their hatred. Theron raised his hand and the hall fell silent. "My court," he said, his voice carrying effortlessly through the space. "Tonight we celebrate the winter solstice, the longest night, and the promise of light returning. But I also wish to introduce someone." He turned to Sorsha, and every eye in the room followed. "This is Lady Sorsha of the Northern Reaches. She came to us from Valdorn as a gesture of peace. She has chosen to remain in Kethrin as our honored guest and ally." Whispers rippled through the crowd. Chosen to remain. Honored guest. Ally. Not prisoner, not tribute, not conquest. A man stepped forward from the crowd, older than most, with the bearing of a high noble and the expression of someone who'd just bitten into something sour. "Your Highness," he said, bowing stiffly. "With respect, this woman is Valdornian. How can we trust her when her king has just threatened war?" "Lord Brennan raises a fair point," another voice added. "A woman this time, elegant and sharp-featured. What guarantee do we have that she isn't a spy sent to gather intelligence before the invasion?" Sorsha's stomach knotted. She opened her mouth to defend herself, but Theron spoke first. "Lady Sorsha is not a spy," he said calmly. "She is a refugee." The word hung in the air. "A refugee?" Lord Brennan repeated. "King Aldrich sent her to us hoping we would kill her." Theron's voice hardened. "She is condemned in Valdorn for crimes she did not commit. Returning her would mean her death. I chose to offer her sanctuary instead." The hall went very quiet. "She is under my protection," Theron continued. "Anyone who threatens her, insults her, or makes her feel unwelcome in this court answers to me directly. Is that understood?" No one spoke. I said. Is that understood? A murmur of assent rippled through the crowd. Lord Brennan bowed his head reluctantly. The sharp-featured woman inclined hers with slightly more grace. Theron turned to Sorsha and offered his arm. Shall we? She took it, feeling the cold seep through his sleeve into her fingers. But beneath the cold, she felt something else. Safety. For the first time in her life, someone had defended her publicly. Had claimed her not as property or burden but as someone worth protecting. They moved through the crowd together, and though the stares continued, the whispers took on a different quality. Curiosity rather than suspicion. Interest rather than hostility. The music began, and couples took to the floor for the traditional solstice dance. Do you dance? Theron asked. Badly. Then we're well matched. Before she could protest, he led her onto the floor. His hand settled at her waist, cold even through the fabric of her gown. Her hand found his shoulder, solid and strong despite the curse eating away at him. Their free hands clasped, and she felt the frost on his fingers like a whisper of winter. They began to move. He was lying about dancing badly. His movements were graceful, controlled, guiding her through the steps with an ease that made her own clumsiness almost disappear. You've done this before, she accused. My mother insisted on lessons. She believed a king should be able to do everything well. What happened to her? The question slipped out before she could stop it. She felt him tense slightly, then relax. She died when I was 12. Fever. It swept through the castle and took a quarter of the servants and my mother with them. I'm sorry. It was a long time ago. But his voice had softened, lost some of its careful control. She would have liked you, I think. She appreciated people who spoke their minds. Even when it was inconvenient? Especially then. He spun her gently, and for a moment the room blurred around them. My father was different. He valued strategy, calculation. He would have seen you as a tool to be used. Like Aldrich sees me. Yes. Theron's grip tightened slightly. But I'm not my father, and I'm not Aldrich. Then what are you? The question was too personal, too intimate for a public dance floor. But something about the music, the movement, the warmth of his attention despite the cold of his skin, made her bold. Theron was quiet for a long moment. I don't know anymore, he admitted finally. I've spent so long trying to survive, trying to find a cure, trying to protect my kingdom from the war I knew was coming. I've forgotten who I was before all of that. Who were you? Young. A ghost of a smile crossed his face. Idealistic. I believed I could change things. End the conflict with Valdorn through diplomacy rather than war. Build something lasting. What changed? My father died. The curse took hold. And I realized that some things can't be changed. They can only be survived. The music swelled toward its conclusion. Theron pulled her closer, close enough that she could see the frost glittering at his temples, the shadows beneath his eyes, the lines of pain he tried so hard to hide. But you make me remember, he said quietly, what hope felt like. Before I forgot? The music ended. They stood frozen in each other's arms, the crowd applauding around them, in the moment stretching like spun glass. Then Sorsha felt it, a warmth spreading from her palm where it rested against his shoulder, a tingling that crept up her arm and settled behind her eyes, a vision trying to surface. Not here, she gasped, pulling away. I need to be somewhere private. Theron understood immediately. He took her arm and guided her through the crowd, moving swiftly but without obvious urgency. They passed through a side door, down a corridor, into a small antechamber lit by a single window. Now, he said, closing the door behind them. What do you see? Sorsha gripped his hands, both of them, letting the cold wash over her as the vision broke through. She saw a woman with silver hair and cruel eyes, chanting words in a language that hurt to hear. She saw blood dripping onto stone, forming patterns that writhed and crawled. She saw Theron's father, younger than she'd imagined, reaching for his son with frost-covered fingers as ice consumed his heart. And beneath it all, she heard a voice. The curse lives in blood. Blood shed it. Blood will end it. But not the blood you expect. The vision shattered. Sorsha stumbled and Theron caught her, his arms wrapping around her as her knees gave way. "What did you see?" he demanded. "The witch," she gasped. "Vesper. I saw her casting the curse, and I heard something." "What?" "The curse lives in blood. Blood shed it. Blood will end it. But not the blood you expect." Theron's arms tightened around her. She felt his heart beating against her cheek, slow and labored, fighting against the ice, trying to still it. "Blood," he repeated. "What does that mean?" "I don't know." She looked up at him, and the distance between their faces was suddenly very small. "But it's more than we had before. It's a direction. It's a riddle. Riddles can be solved." He stared down at her, and his expression shifted. The coldness cracked again, deeper this time, and beneath it she saw raw, desperate hope. "You really believe that?" he said. "That this can be solved?" "I believe I'm going to try." She didn't pull away from his arms, though she knew she should. "I told you I'd give you effort. I meant it." Theron's hand rose to her face. His cold fingers traced her cheekbone, her jaw, the curve of her lower lip. "Why?" he asked. "You owe me nothing. I've kept you prisoner, forced you to use your gift, threatened to keep you here forever. Why would you fight for my life?" Sorsha didn't have an answer. Or rather, she did, but it terrified her too much to say out loud. "Because you defended me," she said instead. "Tonight, in front of everyone. No one has ever done that before. That's not... And because you look at me like I matter." Her voice broke slightly. "Like I'm more than a tool to be used and discarded. Even if that's all I am to you strategically, you make me feel like I could be more." Theron was very still. Then, slowly, he lowered his head and pressed his lips to her forehead. The kiss was soft, cold, and impossibly gentle. It lasted only a moment before he pulled away. "You are more," he said quietly. "Whatever else happens, remember that." He released her and stepped back, the cold retreating with him. "I'll have the scholars research blood magic," he said, his voice controlled once more. "See if anyone knows what the riddle means. In the meantime, you should rest. The visions take a toll." Sorsha nodded, not trusting her voice. Theron opened the door and called for a guard to escort her back to her chambers. But before she left, he caught her hand one final time. "Thank you," he said. "For trying. For believing this can be solved." "Thank you," she replied. "For making me feel worth saving." She walked away with his cold touch still burning on her skin, and the memory of his lips on her forehead searing through her thoughts. Something had changed between them tonight. Something that couldn't be unchanged. And Sorsha wasn't sure if that terrified her or thrilled her more. The days that followed blurred together in a haze of research and revelation. Sorsha threw herself into studying blood magic with an intensity that surprised even her. The castle's library became her second home, its ancient texts and crumbling scrolls her constant companions. Scholars were summoned from across the kingdom, and she spent hours interrogating them about curses, about bloodlines, about the specific magic Vesper had wielded. And through it all, Theron was there. Not constantly, not hovering. He had a kingdom to run, a war to prepare for, 1,000 demands on his time. But he found her. Every morning, without fail, he appeared in the library with a cup of hot tea and a question about her progress. "Anything new?" "Not yet. But I'm close to something. The texts mention a reversal ritual that requires blood of the cursed and blood of the caster," he finished. "I know. Vesper is dead, and her blood burned with her body. There might be another way, If she had relatives, descendants. I've had people searching. So far, nothing. Every evening he came to her chambers for dinner. At first they ate in silence, two strangers bound by circumstance and desperation. But gradually, the silences filled with words. He told her about his childhood, about his mother's gentle wisdom and his father's harsh expectations. She told him about the village where she'd grown up, about her mother's gift, and how she'd tried to hide it from the world. She knew they'd come for her eventually, Sorsha said one night, staring into the fire. The seers before her had all been found and killed. She thought if she never used the gift, if she raised me to suppress mine, we might escape. But you didn't. I was 12, when a merchant came to our village selling spoiled goods that made people sick. I saw it, saw the sickness spreading, and saw the deaths that would follow. I screamed out the vision in the middle of the market square. You saved them. I condemned us. She pulled her shawl tighter. The soldiers came that night. Someone had reported a seer in the village. My mother burned while I watched. Theron's hand found hers. Cold. Always cold, but steady. And Aldrich kept you alive because you could be useful, he said. I spent 6 years as his secret weapon. Every time a noble seemed too ambitious, every time a treaty seemed too good to be true, he'd bring me to a private chamber and force me to look at whoever he suspected. I'd tell him what I saw, Ari, and he'd act accordingly. Did you ever refuse? Once. She touched her palm where the brand lay hidden. That's when I got this. Theron lifted her hand and pressed his lips to the covered mark. The gesture was so unexpected, so tender, that Sorsha forgot to breathe. He'll pay, Theron said against her palm, for everything he did to you. I swear it. She should have been alarmed by the violence in his voice. Instead, she felt only warmth. The weeks passed. Sorsha's visions came more frequently now, triggered by proximity to Theron, by the growing connection between them. She saw fragments of the past, glimpses of possible futures, pieces of a puzzle she was slowly learning to assemble. The curse was tied to Vesper's bloodline. That much became clear. Her magic had been anchored in her own blood, passed down through generations of practitioners who'd refined and strengthened it. If we can find anyone connected to her line, Sorsha explained, spreading notes across the table between them, we might be able to use their blood in the reversal ritual. Vesper was the last of her family, Theron said. She made certain of that. Part of her initiation into dark magic was eliminating anyone who might be used against her. There has to be someone she missed, a distant cousin, an illegitimate child. Someone. My people have been searching for 9 years. Then they're looking in the wrong places. Theron's eyebrows rose. You have a suggestion? She was Valdornian, wasn't she? Infiltrated your court from Aldrich's kingdom? Yes. Then perhaps her family records are in Valdorn, hidden or destroyed, but somewhere in the archives. Sorsha paused, considering. My visions showed her performing certain rituals, speaking certain words. Only someone with seer abilities might recognize the significance of those details. Your spies wouldn't know what to look for. But I would. Archives that Aldrich controls? Archives that might contain the answer to your curse. Sorsha held his gaze steadily. We need to find a way to access them. You're suggesting we send spies into enemy territory on the eve of war. I'm suggesting that if we don't try, you die in 6 months regardless of what war does or doesn't happen. Theron was quiet for a long moment. Then he laughed. That rare, warm sound that transformed his face. You're relentless, he said. I'm motivated. By what? The question hung between them. Sorsha thought about lying, and about saying something strategic, something sensible, something that didn't reveal how much she'd come to care about this cold, complicated, dying man. But he could smell lies. By you, she admitted. By wanting you to live. By... She hesitated, then forced herself to continue. By whatever this is between us. Theron went very still. This. he repeated carefully. Don't pretend you haven't noticed. Heat crept into her cheeks. You come to me every morning, every evening. You touch me whenever you can find an excuse. You look at me like what? Like I'm the first warm thing you've felt in years. The words fell between them like stones into deep water. Theron rose from his chair and crossed to where she sat. He knelt before her, bringing their faces level, and took both her hands in his. The cold was intense this close. She could see frost forming on his eyelashes, on the strands of dark hair falling across his forehead. The curse was progressing, stealing his warmth day by day. You are, he said quietly, the first warm thing, in longer than I can remember. Theron. When I touch you, the cold retreats. Just for a moment. When I'm near you, I remember what it felt like before the curse took hold. You make me feel... He trailed off, and she saw him struggling to find words. Human, he finished finally. You make me feel human again. Sorsha's heart raced against her ribs. That's not... She started. I know. His grip tightened on her hands. I know I have no right. I've kept you prisoner. I've used your gift for my own survival. I've given you every reason to hate me. I don't hate you. You should. Maybe. She turned her hands in his, interlacing their fingers. But I don't. I stopped hating you weeks ago. Now I just... What? She looked at him, at this man who'd been her jailer and had become her ally, her companion, her something she didn't have a name for yet. I just want you to live, she said. Whatever else happens, whatever this is or isn't, I want you to live. Theron released a breath he seemed to have been holding for years. Then he leaned forward and pressed his forehead to hers. The cold washed over her, but beneath it, she felt something else. A flicker of warmth, faint but unmistakable. As if his nearness to her was fighting back against the curse, melting the ice from the inside. I'll send the spies, he murmured against her skin, to Valdorn. Oh, we'll find Vesper's records. And if we don't find anything, then we'll find another way. He pulled back to look at her, and his eyes were brighter than she'd ever seen them. Together. Together. Such a simple word, such a profound promise. That night, after he left her chambers, Sorsha lay awake staring at the ceiling. She was falling in love with him. The realization should have terrified her. It did terrify her. But beneath the fear was something else. Hope. For the first time in her life, she had something to fight for beyond survival. Someone who saw her as more than a tool, more than a burden, more than a problem to be disposed of. She was falling in love with a dying man, and she would burn the world to ashes before she let him go. The spies returned on the 23rd day since Sorsha had arrived in Kethrin. She was in the library when Cormac found her, his scarred face tight with urgency. The Alpha requires your presence, he said, immediately. She followed him through corridors that had become familiar over the past weeks, her heart hammering with anticipation. The spies had been gone for nearly 3 weeks, infiltrating Valdorn's archives, searching for any trace of Vesper's bloodline. If they'd returned empty-handed, she pushed the thought away. Theron waited in his war room, but he wasn't alone. 2 figures in travel-stained clothing stood before him, a man and woman who bore the exhausted look of people who'd ridden hard for days. Tell her what you told me, Theron commanded. The woman stepped forward. My lady, we found the records, hidden in a sealed chamber beneath the royal archives. Protected by wards that took us 3 days to break. They'd been recently relocated, moved just months ago, and secured with fresh enchantments. That's why no previous search had uncovered them. And? Sorsha could barely breathe. Vesper had a child. The woman's voice dropped. A son, born in secret before she began her work as an assassin. She gave him to a noble family to raise, hiding his true parentage to protect him from her enemies. Who? Theron demanded. Who was the child? The male spy reached into his coat and withdrew a sheaf of yellowed papers. The records trace the bloodline through 3 generations, Your Highness. The child was raised as Lord Gavril Morn. His daughter married into the Valdornian royal family. Sorsha's blood turned to ice. King Aldric, she whispered. Aldric is Vesper's descendant. The room went silent. Theron's hands gripped the edge of the table, frost spreading across the wood beneath his fingers. You're certain? The records are clear, Your Highness. The witch who cursed your father was Aldric's great-grandmother. He carries her blood. Sorsha's mind raced. The riddle from her vision. Blood shed it. Blood will end it. But not the blood you expect. That's why he wanted me gone, she said slowly, the pieces falling into place. He wasn't just disposing of a troublesome seer. He was afraid I'd discover the truth. If it became known that the King of Valdorn descended from a dark witch, Cormac began. His claim to the throne would be challenged. Theron finished. The noble families would turn on him. His own people would demand his abdication. He's been hiding this his entire life. Sorsha looked at the papers in the spy's hands, murdering anyone who got too close to the truth. Her mother's face flashed through her mind, the flames, the screams. My mother, she breathed. She was investigating something before she died. I always assumed it was unrelated to me, something she'd seen in a vision. But what if she discovered Aldric's secret? Theron's voice was gentle, despite the cold rage burning in his eyes. What if that's why she really died? The grief hit Sorsha like a physical blow. All these years, she'd believed her mother had burned because of her, because of the vision she'd screamed in the marketplace. But what if her mother had been targeted long before that? What if Sorka's outburst had simply provided a convenient excuse? He killed her, Sorsha said, her voice shaking, to protect his secret. Theron crossed to her and took her hands. The cold seeped through her skin, but she barely felt it. We'll make him pay, he promised. For your mother. For my father. For everything. How? She looked up at him. He's a king surrounded by an army, and we need his blood to break the curse. We'll find a way. In just over 2 weeks? The deadline loomed like an executioner's blade. The war begins before the month ends. You'll be too weak to fight. Your kingdom will fall. Then we move faster. His certainty should have reassured her. Instead, it broke something open inside her chest. I can't lose you, she heard herself say. Not now. Not when I've finally found. She stopped, the words catching in her throat. Theron's hands tightened on hers. Finally, found what? The library, the spies, the war, all of it faded away. There was only him, this cold, dying man who'd become her entire world. You, she whispered. I've found you, and I love you, and I cannot watch you die. The confession hung between them, raw and terrifying and true. Theron's expression cracked. The careful control he always maintained shattered, and beneath it she saw everything he'd been hiding. Hope. Fear. Longing so deep it seemed to go on forever. Sorsha, he breathed. I know you can't. She started. I love you. The words stopped her cold. I've loved you since the night you touched my face and saw my death, he continued, his voice rough. I've loved you through every morning tea and every evening dinner and every moment in between. I love the way you argue with me and the way you refuse to give up and the way you look at me like I'm worth saving. Tears burned in her eyes. Theron. I was afraid to say it. Afraid that naming it would make it real, and real things can be lost. His forehead pressed against hers, and she felt the frost on his skin, the cold that was slowly killing him. But I'm more afraid of dying without you knowing. I love you, Sorsha. Whatever happens next, I need you to know that. She kissed him. The cold shocked through her lips, her tongue, and her entire body. But beneath it, she tasted something warm, something alive, something fighting desperately against the ice. His arms wrapped around her, pulling her close, and for one perfect moment, the curse didn't matter. The war didn't matter. Nothing mattered except this man and this kiss, and this love that had grown between them like flowers through frost. Then Theron made a sound like breaking glass. He wrenched away from her, his hand flying to his chest. His face went white, whiter than she'd ever seen it, and frost exploded across his skin in crystalline patterns. "Theron!" She caught him as he staggered. "What's happening?" "The curse," he gasped. "It's reached my heart. I can feel it." His eyes rolled back. He collapsed in her arms. "Help!" Sorsha screamed. "Someone help me!" Cormac rushed forward, and together they lowered Theron to the floor. His lips were blue, his skin covered in frost, his chest barely moving. "The curse is accelerating," Cormac said grimly. "We have days at most. Maybe hours." But then Sorsha noticed something. It the places where her tears had fallen on his skin, where her warmth had touched him during their kiss. The frost was melting there, ever so slightly. "Her presence is slowing it," one of the scholars whispered. "The seer's connection to him. It's fighting the curse." Hope flickered in Sorsha's chest. She looked down at the man she loved, dying in her arms, and made a decision. "Prepare me a horse," she said. "I'm going to Valdorn." "My lady, that's suicide." "I don't care." She met Cormac's eyes, and whatever he saw in her expression silenced his protests. "Aldrich's blood is the only thing that can save him. I'm going to get it." "How?" She thought of her gift, her curse, the power she'd spent her whole life suppressing. "I'm going to show him exactly what happens when you threaten someone a seer loves." They moved Theron to his chambers and packed his body in blankets that did nothing against the cold consuming him from within. Sorsha sat beside his bed, holding his frozen hand, watching the frost creep further across his skin with every passing hour. But where her palm touched his, the ice retreated slightly, her warmth, her love, buying him precious time. "You should rest, my lady," Bria said softly. "The journey to Valdorn is long. You'll need your strength." "I'll rest when he's safe." Bria hesitated, then sat down beside her. "May I speak freely?" "Always." "I've served in this castle for 15 years. I watched the old Alpha die from this curse. When I watched Prince Theron search desperately for a cure while the ice slowly claimed him." She looked at Sorsha with something like wonder. "In all that time, I never saw him smile. Not once. Not until you came." Sorsha's throat tightened. "You changed something in him," Bria continued. "Woke something up. Whatever happens in Valdorn, I want you to know that you gave him more happiness in these weeks than he's had in 9 years. It's not enough." Sorsha's voice broke. "I want to give him a lifetime." "Then go take it." Bria squeezed her hand. "Take it from the man who stole it." She left at midnight. Cormac tried to send guards with her, but she refused. A group would draw attention. A single rider, cloaked and hooded, might slip through unnoticed. The journey took 2 days of brutal riding, pushing herself and her horse beyond exhaustion. She stopped only to switch mounts at border villages, barely pausing to eat or drink. 2 days of not knowing if Theron was still alive. 2 days of praying her connection to him was still buying him time. On the 3rd morning, she saw the golden spires of Valdorn rising against the dawn. She'd spent the journey planning. Aldrich would never agree to give his blood willingly. He'd never admit to his heritage in front of witnesses. She needed to force his hand. And to do that, she needed leverage. Her gift? All her life, she'd used it reluctantly, fearfully, only when forced. But now she embraced it. She let the visions come, let them wash over her as she studied the castle from a distance. She saw guards and their rotations. She saw servants and their loyalties. She saw the king himself, pacing his chambers, radiating anxiety despite his outward confidence. And she saw something else, a woman in the dungeons, chained to a wall, Barely alive, but burning with rage, Sorsha recognized her. Lady Maren, one of Aldrich's advisors, a woman who'd disappeared months ago. Officially, she'd retired to the country for health reasons. Unofficially, Sorsha now understood. She'd discovered something she shouldn't have. Another victim of Aldrich's desperate secret-keeping. Sorsha smiled grimly. She'd found her leverage. Breaking into the castle was easier than it should have been. Her visions guided her through servant entrances and abandoned corridors, past guards whose attention was always elsewhere, down into the dungeons where the king kept his mistakes. Lady Maren looked up as Sorsha approached her cell, her eyes widening with recognition. "The seer," she croaked. "You're supposed to be dead." Disappointed? Relieved? Maren struggled to sit up, chains rattling. "I found the records. About his grandmother. He threw me down here before I could tell anyone." "I know." Sorsha produced a lockpick she'd stolen from a guard. "That's why I'm here." The lock clicked open. Maren stared at her in disbelief. "Why would you help me? You are nothing in this court." "Less than nothing." "Because the man I love is dying from a curse laid by Aldrich's ancestor. Because my mother was murdered to protect his secret. Because I'm done being nothing." Sorsha helped Maren to her feet. "And because I need a witness when I confront him." Understanding dawned in Maren's eyes. "You're going to expose him. I'm going to destroy him." They found Aldrich in his private study. He was alone, which was fortunate. He was also armed, which was not. But the moment he saw Sorsha standing in his doorway with Lady Maren at her side, the color drained from his face. "Impossible," he breathed. "You're supposed to be dead? Disposed of? A problem you shipped to Catherine hoping the wolf would solve?" Sorsha stepped into the room, and for the first time in her life, she felt no fear, only cold, clear purpose. "You underestimated him, and you underestimated me." Aldrich's hand moved toward his sword. "Guards!" "They won't come." Sorsha smiled. "I saw exactly which ones to bribe and which ones are loyal to Lady Maren. Right now, the corridor is empty. It's just us." "What do you want?" "Your blood." Aldrich laughed, high and nervous. "You've lost your mind. Your great-grandmother was Vesper, the witch who cursed the Cathrani royal line. Her curse can only be broken with her descendants' blood." Sorsha advanced on him. "That's you, Aldrich. You're the key." "That's a lie, a fabrication. I am descended from Lord Gavril Morn, who was Vesper's secret son. I have the records. So does Lady Maren. So do a dozen other people I've positioned throughout your kingdom, ready to release the information if anything happens to me." Aldrich's face went gray. "You have a choice," Sorsha continued. "Give me your blood willingly and watch your secret remain hidden. Or refuse, and I'll make sure every noble family in Valdorn knows that their king descends from a dark witch. How long do you think you'll keep your throne then?" "You're bluffing." "I'm a seer." "Ha, Aldrich! I've spent my entire life seeing through lies." She held his gaze, letting him see the truth in hers. "I'm not bluffing, and you know it." The silence stretched. Then, with a snarl of rage, Aldrich drew his sword and lunged at her. Sorsha had seen it coming. She twisted aside, and the blade passed through empty air. Before he could recover, she grabbed his wrist and wrenched it, a move Cormac had taught her during their long nights in the castle. The sword clattered to the floor. "One more thing," Sorsha said, her voice cold. "My mother. You had her killed, didn't you, when she got too close to the truth?" Aldrich's silence was answer enough. "She wasn't just a seer. She was investigating you, your heritage, your lies." Sorsha's grip tightened until he gasped in pain. She died to protect a secret that was never even hers to keep. She was going to ruin everything. She was my mother. Sorsha didn't let him see her cry. She didn't let him see anything except the cold, implacable fury of a woman who had lost everything and was finally taking something back. Lady Maren stepped forward with a silver bowl and a small knife. Your blood, she said, or your kingdom. Choose. Aldrich chose. The ride back to Kethrin was the longest of Sorsha's life. She pushed her horse beyond exhaustion, switching mounts at every village, barely stopping to eat or sleep. The vial of Aldrich's blood hung around her neck on a silver chain, precious beyond measure. 3 days. 3 days of not knowing if Theron still breathed. 3 days of imagining the worst. The 3 days of pushing herself past every limit she'd ever known. When the black towers of Kethrin finally appeared on the horizon, she nearly wept with relief. Cormac met her at the gates, and the expression on his face made her heart stop. Is he alive? The word came out rough, exhausted. Barely. The curse is nearly completed. His heart beats maybe once a minute now. But something has been holding it back. The scholars believe it's your connection to him, still fighting even from a distance. Sorsha kicked her horse into a gallop. She burst into Theron's chambers to find him lying exactly where she'd left him, but worse. So much worse. His entire body was encased in frost, and his skin had turned the pale blue of a winter sky. His chest was still, utterly still, and for one terrible moment she thought she was too late. Then she saw it. The faintest flutter of movement. His heart, fighting its last battle against the ice. The ritual, she said to the scholars who hovered around the bed. Now. We do it now. They'd prepared everything in her absence. Candles arranged in careful patterns, herbs burning in copper bowls, ancient words written on parchment that trembled in shaking hands. Sorsha took her place beside Theron's bed and uncorked the vial. Blood of the caster's line, she said, letting 3 drops fall onto his frozen chest. Blood that began the curse. The frost hissed where the blood touched it, but held firm. Blood of the cursed. The head scholar drew a small knife across Theron's palm, and pale, sluggish blood welled up. Blood that carries the curse. Still nothing. The scholars exchanged worried glances. Then there's supposed to be a third element, the head scholar said, consulting his notes. The ritual requires 3 bloods. Caster, cursed, and... He trailed off. And what? Sorsha demanded. The texts are unclear. Blood freely given is all they say. Blood sacrificed willingly for the cursed one. Blood freely given. Sorsha understood. She took the knife from the scholar's hand and drew it across her own palm without hesitation. The pain was sharp, bright, and real. Blood welled up, warm and red, and she pressed her bleeding hand against Theron's frozen chest. Blood freely given, she said. My blood. For him. For love. The reaction was immediate. Light exploded through the room, blinding white and searing hot. The frost on Theron's body cracked, splintered, began to melt. Sorsha felt heat pour out of her palm and into his chest. May felt something ancient and malevolent shrieking as it was torn apart. The curse fought back. She felt it trying to spread to her, trying to freeze her blood the way it had frozen his. But her love was stronger, her sacrifice was freely given, and no dark magic could stand against that. The light faded, the frost was gone, and Theron's eyes opened. Sorsha, he breathed. She was crying, laughing, collapsing onto his chest as color flooded back into his cheeks and warmth returned to his skin. You're alive, she sobbed. You're alive, you're alive. His arms wrapped around her, strong and warm, warm, for the first time since she'd known him. You saved me, he said, wonder in his voice. You actually saved me. I told you I would. She pulled back to look at him, to see the color in his face, the warmth in his eyes, in the frost completely vanished from his skin. I told you I'd burn the world to keep you. You went to Valdorn, alone. You faced Aldrich. I'd do it again. She pressed her forehead to his. 1,000 times. For you. Theron kissed her. And this time, there was no cold. Only warmth. Only heat. only the overwhelming joy of two people who had fought death itself and won. The scholars quietly withdrew. Cormac bowed and closed the door behind him, and Sorsha and Theron stayed wrapped in each other's arms, alive and warm, and finally free. 6 months later, Sorsha stood on the balcony of Kethrin Castle and watched spring arrive. The mountains were shedding their winter coats, green shoots pushing through melting snow. In the courtyard below, children played while their parents gathered for the celebration. Banners streamed from every tower, and music drifted up from the Great Hall. Today was her wedding day. Not a political arrangement, not a contract written in desperation. A true wedding, born of love and choice and everything they'd fought to build together. "You're going to be late to your own ceremony." Sorsha turned to find Bria in the doorway, smiling. "I know." She looked back at the view. "I just wanted a moment to remember." "Remember what?" "What I was, before I came here." Sorsha touched the railing, warm stone beneath her fingers. "I was nothing. A tool. A problem to be disposed of. And now? Now you're about to become queen. Now I'm about to marry the man I love." She shook her head slightly. "The title is just a bonus." Bria helped her with the final touches of her gown, and a creation of silver and white that made her look like moonlight given form. The brand on her palm was visible now, displayed openly. Theron had insisted. In Kethrin, her gift was no longer shameful. It was honored. The war with Valdorn had never come. When Lady Maren released the documents proving Aldric's heritage, his own nobles had turned on him within weeks. He'd been deposed, imprisoned, his throne given to a distant cousin who'd immediately sued for peace. The curse was broken. Not just for Theron, but for his entire bloodline. Their children, when they came, would never know the cold that had haunted his family for generations. And Sorsha's mother had finally been given justice. Her name cleared, her grave honored, her memory preserved in a way Aldric had never allowed. "Ready?" Bria asked. "Yes." Sorsha smiled. "I've been ready for a long time." The ceremony was held in the great hall where she'd first seen Theron. She walked through the same doors she'd entered as a prisoner, past the same nobles who'd once whispered about her. But this time, they bowed as she passed. This time, they smiled with genuine warmth. And at the end of the aisle, Theron waited. He was beautiful in formal black, his dark hair pulled back, his silver eyes bright with emotion. No frost lingered at his temples. No cold radiated from his skin. He looked young in a way she'd never seen, unburdened, free. He looked alive. Sorsha reached him and he took her hands in his. Warm, strong, steady. "I was going to prepare something," he murmured, low enough for only her to hear. "A speech, but standing here, looking at you, and I've forgotten every word." "Then just say what you feel." "I feel..." He paused, searching for words. "I feel like I've been walking through winter my entire life. Cold and dark and endless. And then you appeared and suddenly there was sunlight." Sorsha's eyes burned with tears. "You saved me," Theron continued. "Not just from the curse. From myself. From the man I was becoming. Frozen in more ways than one. You showed me what it meant to feel again. To hope. To love. You saved me too," she whispered. "You saw me when no one else would look. You protected me when everyone else wanted me gone. You made me believe I was worth something. You were always worth everything." He raised her hands to his lips, pressing a kiss to each palm. "I was just the first one smart enough to see it." She laughed through her tears. The ceremony continued. Vows spoken, rings exchanged, promises made before gods and witnesses. And when the priest declared them husband and wife, Theron kissed her with all the warmth he'd been denied for 9 long years. The hall erupted in cheers. Later, after the feast and the dancing and the endless congratulations, they escaped to the tower where he'd first told her about the curse. The war room had been transformed. Maps and weapons replaced by comfortable furniture, a fire crackling in the hearth, windows thrown open to let in the spring air. "I have something for you," Theron said. He reached into his pocket and withdrew a small box. Inside, nestled on velvet, was a ring set with a stone the color of flames. "My mother's," he explained. "She told me once to give it to the woman who made me feel warm again." He slipped it onto her finger, beside the wedding band. "It took me a while to find her." Sorsha looked at the ring, then at him, then back at the ring. "I was sent here to die," she said softly. "A disposable tribute, a problem to be eliminated. I know. And now I'm your queen, your wife, my everything." Theron pulled her close. "My warmth, my hope, my future. Everything I have and everything I am." "How did this happen?" she asked, wonder in her voice. "You happened." He pressed his forehead to hers. "You walked into my hall, hidden and afraid and determined to survive, and you changed everything." "We changed each other." "Yes." He smiled, and it still transformed his face, still made him look younger and brighter and impossibly beautiful. "We did." They stood together at the window, watching the stars emerge over the mountains. "Aldrich sent me to seal a peace," Sorsha said eventually. "He never imagined what kind of peace I'd actually find." "Are you happy?" She turned in his arms to face him. This man who'd been her captor and become her salvation. This cold king who'd learned to feel warmth again. This impossible, wonderful, unexpected love. "I spent my whole life being told I was worthless," she said. "A burden. A problem. A curse in human form." She cupped his face in her hands. "And then I met someone who was actually cursed, and he looked at me like I was the answer to everything. So yes, I'm happy. I'm so happy I don't know what to do with it." "Spend it on me," Theron said. "Spend all of it on me. For the rest of our lives. That's a lot of happiness. I have a lot of time to make up for." She kissed him then, long and deep and full of promise. Behind them, the fire crackled warmly. Above them, the stars wheeled in their eternal dance, and before them stretched a future neither of them had ever dared to imagine. The Alpha King had sent her to seal a peace with his rival. He'd expected her to disappear into obscurity or death. Instead, she'd found love. She'd broken an ancient curse. She'd become a queen. And she'd proven that even the most disposable person could change the world, if only someone believed she was worth keeping. Theron had refused to let her return. She was grateful for that refusal every single day. Thank you for listening to this story. If you enjoyed it, please like, subscribe, and leave a comment below. Your support means everything. Let me know what you thought. I always read your comments, and they mean more than you know.